Hello there and welcome to JJ Painting. I am JJ and today we are going to be doing something we haven't done for a little while. We're going to be reviewing a novel. We're going to be reviewing, as you can tell from the title, the Siege of Terra first book, Solar War. Yeah, that one. And we're going to be painting this model, which is at least somewhat related to it, because, you know, contains Space Marines and Chaos Space Marines. They're all involved. So that's what we'll be doing today. So without further ado, let's crack on. The Siege of Terra series starts with this novel here, Solar War. It takes place during the initial invasion of the solar system, and as such takes place almost exclusively in space. That in and of itself is actually a really interesting start point. Most of the Horus Heresy novels, with a handful of exceptions, have largely taken place on planets or around collections of worlds, but it's very rare for the emphasis to be on the actual space combat and the journey through space as well, which I think is a nice way to start this series off because it brings everything onto a slightly new playing field. We've been to Terra before throughout the series, but this is the first time we see it like this. It's always been a place waiting for the storm, but now the storm has come and it is breaking in force against the defenders. Speaking of which, it follows the first push of Horus and his allies against the Throne World, and we do see our key defenders that we've seen throughout the series, such as Rogul Dawn and Su-Kasan, who are the defenders of Terra and of the solar system on the whole. It also follows the desperate escape of original Horus Heresy character Mercedes Aleton from the oncoming tide of war. And again, no spoilers here, but as we all know, she is in the solar system by this point, and we see what her journey is. We also see things from the perspective of various individuals scattered across the war zone that is the solar system, some of whom are old favourites from the Heresy, and some are created very much to be consumed within this book, but we'll get to that in a bit. Also, the blurb itself says, interestingly enough, that after 7 years of conflict, which made me laugh because last time I checked, it's been 14 years Games Workshop. So I think the first thing I want to say about this book is it really did leave me in awe because of the sheer scale of the book itself. It feels bigger and more ambitious than anything else we've seen throughout the Horus Heresy series, and it did give me the impression that the vast, endless depths of space that we think of were completely packed and completely full. There was no room to do anything. It literally feels like every inch of space around the solar system was full of ships and full of conflict and full of explosions, which is a fantastic way to set up a book called The Solar War, and it is something which I don't think we've ever actually seen in the Heresy. Even in the larger space battles, it still feels like there's the endless depth of space around them, but not here, and that's unique. And whilst we're talking about that, it's not just the size of the fleets, but also the size of the vessels themselves in some cases. And I just want to read you this short quote from the book, in fact, to emphasise this. "A shape pushed through the fire-lit dust and haze. At first it looked like a pitted asteroid or a wreck. Then the bulk behind its prow burst through the swirl. The dead of a millennia of war amongst the stars were its mass, mangled carcasses of starships, asteroids, towers, and broken star fortresses, all crushed together by the immaterium. It was a macro-agglomeration of debris and dead things secreted by storm tides, a pearl of sorrow, a space hulk. Pushing and hauling it through the warp had cost dozens of ships, and once pushed back into reality, it would never move again. That, though, was not its purpose. The size of one of Uranus's moons, it was made to be a besieger's redoubt at the gates of a greater fortress. The Daughter of Woe, it had been named." So straight away, that gives us a sense of the scale of these ships. They're bringing through things that aren't just designed to be battleships or the Gloriana-class vessels that the Primarchs will use. This thing is the size of a moon, and to bring something like that even into, the sun's gravity well is quite substantial and quite significant. But again, we're going with this idea of everything scaled up. And as a result, it's designed to be bigger than anything that came before it. And getting onto that, I genuinely think this is one of the big strengths of this book. It's meant to be bigger than the Istvan conflict, or the Prospero conflict, or Caut, or Cygnus, or anything else that has come before it. And that really comes across from the word go here. As you can probably tell from that short reading, the language itself everything takes a bit longer to happen, but it definitely gives it a sense of weight and strength to it as well. But we'll get to that in a second as well. The other thing I want to mention at this point is there is an air of intrigue and mystery surrounding this book that I personally liked. It's not just about the massive conflict going on in the solar system. And the series itself, the Horus Heresy, has never been straightforward. And this mystery did keep me guessing as to what the characters' goals were throughout the book and what was going on behind the scenes that we couldn't necessarily see. And another strength that this book does have is that it doesn't put all its cards on the table straight away. It holds things back, it keeps things hidden, and it's not until the end that you receive the real gut punches in certain places as well. And the other thing I think is worth mentioning at this point is that the ending of the book was satisfying, as it brought closure to some aspects of the Horus Heresy at large, while setting things up for the rest of the Siege of Terra and even beyond that. So this book itself is actually taking time to allow us to get some closure and to put certain things behind us before we get into the next stage. The length of the Horus Heresy as a series has meant that it's left many things open for a very, very long time, and some of them are quite hard to keep track of unless you read the books either quite regularly or have read them all quite recently. So I'm glad that the Siege of Terra has, at this early stage, put a few things to bed that the series itself does need to move past. I think the real strengths of this novel really do boil down to three key things for me. First of all, it keeps track of where everyone is throughout the book, which is a massive challenge considering how big the cast is. This isn't a story of one or two characters. This has many characters spread over the entire solar system, and that was always going to be tricky, I imagine, but they've pulled it off very well here. It also feels like it's raising the stakes on an extremely high-stakes story. Now, throughout the series, we've seen big battles. We've never seen a battle this big, but also we've never seen a battle this important. This is the throne world. This is the seat of power for the entire Imperium. Everyone there knows how important this conflict is, and this significance is reflected throughout the entire book. Everyone there is wholeheartedly aware that this is the do or die, succeed or fail moment. No one is going to take this lightly, and as a result, everyone's throwing everything they've got into it. So it gives us an emotional connection to a lot of the characters in the book that I'm not saying we've not had before, but it's far more prevalent and far more open here than we may have seen in previous books. And lastly, it lets us take stock of the series and the characters. Now, I've mentioned before that it does give us some closure on some things and leaves other things set up, but I think it's good that this book also takes a moment just to catch its breath in the few seconds it has to do that, and actually remind us, here we are, 14 years in our time, 7 years in theirs, many books, many battles, many characters who have come and gone, many heroes and many villains, and it's all come together to this point here. And that, I think, is a real strength in this book, that it takes that time to actually let us all catch our breath, look around and go, we're finally here. Look who's turned up, but also look who hasn't turned up at the same time. And that's quite an individual thing, I think. Everyone may read that slightly differently, but I definitely think it's to the book's strength that we do that. However, there are definitely things in this book which aren't weaknesses, but they're definitely things that kind of take away some of the shine from the book. So it is so epic, and I mean this when I say this, it is so epic it's hard to read in a single sitting. Some chapters contain more action than entire previous books in the Horus Heresy series have combined, and the sheer scale of the battles and the conflicts and everything going on makes it very hard to want to sit and read it. There are other books in the past I've been able to sit and read in one sitting, but this is one of those books where I kind of had to put it down every chapter or every few pages just to take a breath because so much is going on, and as a result it does mean that the pacing is hard to get back into once you put it down. It also does jump around a lot with the core cast, which, even though it's very well done that they've kept track of who they are, it can be a little bit tough just to keep up with who the core characters are, and the reason for this is we do occasionally have some unnecessary cutaways that emphasise the sheer scale of this conflict. Now, again, this isn't necessarily a weakness, but it is a bit of a shame that when we're following characters like Rogel Dawn or Mercedia Leeton, what we suddenly find ourselves is cutting away from them at a crucial moment to be reminded of the massive war going on outside before cutting to another character. Overall, this doesn't hurt the book too much, and like I said, they've done so many things right that this really is a minor niggle, but at the same time it is something to bear in mind going into it if you've not read it. But if you don't mind that sort of thing, then that's absolutely fine. You'll still enjoy the book immensely. I certainly did. And the last thing to say about this is that we do see a lot of fake-outs in this book as well. So there are characters throughout the series who are present in 40k who occasionally look like they're approaching death or are going to die and then they don't. This book, unfortunately, is no exception. There are fake-outs galore in this book, so just keep that in mind as you're reading it. Anyway, but that's all I can really say about it that's negative, and to be fair, there's not that much. But to conclude on it, this book, it does kick off the last leg of the heresy with a bang, and it's a bang that's bigger than just about anything else we've heard before, which sets it up perfectly. And it really is a single chapter, or even just a single moment in an epic story that is bigger and more ambitious than almost anything that came before it. So I'm glad that they captured that moment brilliantly, and I would heartily recommend it to just about anyone. Again, it's a Horus Heresy book, so it couldn't hurt to read the other Horus Heresy books before you try to tackle this one, otherwise it might not be that easy, so it's probably the best thing to do is to read the other Heresy books first, or at least read the significant ones. I want to leave this with you again. Tell me your thoughts. For those of you out there who've read it, do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? I'd like to hear your thoughts and opinions below, but if you've not read it, then happy reading. I'm genuinely sure you'll have a great time. So there we are, Solar War the review. And thank you very much for watching. Let me know what you think. If there's things you agree with me or you don't agree with me on, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And there's our model there looking all finished. But thank you very much for watching. Goodbye and have a lovely day.